Welcome to my next episode of The People's Tomorrow. I'm your host, Gerald Tenenbaum. My hope is that this show will act as your window into the future, where you'll learn about everything from politics and history to business and being a restaurateur. I believe you will take away important information about each career I am highlighting and have the opportunity to see what is necessary to do to make progression for when it is our generation's time to enter the workforce, hitting the ground running. Today, I welcome Representative Simon Cataldo. Mr. Cataldo grew up in West Concord. He went through the Concord public school system, attending Thoreau Elementary School, CMS, and where we are now, Concord Carlisle High School. Upon graduation, he attended Colorado College, where he studied environmental science and contributed to research on the chemistry of biodiesel and the thermodynamics of residential energy. Upon completing his undergraduate degree, he taught special education as a math teacher in Harlem with Teach for America, where he founded Harlem Lacrosse, a national school-based nonprofit that provides academic, emotional, and athletic support for at-risk youth. Later, he went to the University of Virginia for law school, where he was the managing editor of the Law Review. Afterward, in 2015, he was accepted into the U.S. Department of Justice Criminal Division's Honors Program and served in a specialized unit focusing exclusively on public corruption. As a member of that team, he investigated and prosecuted several elected officials, and he returned home to Concord in 2020, where he and his wife are now raising 3 boys. He then was elected to the House of Representatives, representing the 14th Middlesex District in 2022. Representative Cataldo was recently appointed chair of the Special Commission on Combating Anti-Semitism, serves as the House appointee to the Restorative Justice Advisory Committee, and is a member of the Joint Committee on Labor and Workforce Development, the Joint Committee on Financial Services, the Joint Committee on Mental Health and Substance Use and Recovery, and the House Committee on Federal Stimulus and Census Oversight. So I'd like to welcome you, I'll give you a big warm welcome, Mr. Cataldo.
Gerald, thanks so much. Thank you for having me on the show.
Of course.
Congratulations for having a show.
Thank
It's amazing that you have a show.
Thank you.
I have one too, and that was a much better start to your second episode than I had for mine.
Thank you.
So congrats.
I try my best. Takes a while to get it down. It's definitely tough. You gave me a lot there with all the committees and all that. It took me a while.
Yeah, well, I think this is hard to do, and I was just talking about this with somebody the other day as it related to some geopolitical issues. Modeling conversations, I think, is something that's really important for people to hear right now. And we're making a lot of progress on that with podcasts, but local TV is an awesome platform to use. Local journalism in general, but people don't see and model this kind of conversation that we're about to have right now very often, and I think this is a real growth area for us.
Well, I definitely agree with you. And just to segue off a little bit, I was wondering, because the show is all about the future, and to know what your perspective on the future is, of course, we have to know what your life was before now. So I was wondering, when you were around high school age, were there any special teachers or any coaches or anything like that that inspired you to pick a career path?
Yes. I wasn't really thinking about a career at that time, but like many kids, I needed to be inspired just to, get up and go to school in the morning and do my work. When I think about teachers that were really inspiring to me, a lot of them are still here. Ms. Davies, Ms. Fox-Morrow, Mr. Urid. Mr. Urid wasn't even one of my academic teachers, but he helped me. I very randomly decided to enter a short story contest, and he helped me write a short story. And that was like a really special kind of bond that we had. All of those folks are still here. Mr. Atlas was one of my math teachers, Ms. Gaffney, and later when I became a math teacher, I basically tried to copy everything that they did in teaching me math. So I had great relationships with teachers here, even though to be very direct, I was not an exceptional student in any particular subject matter area. But I think that actually speaks more to the quality and really the exceptionalism of the faculty here, that they're able to connect with students who aren't at the very top of the class.
No, I agree with you. I found here too that a lot of teachers are just incredible. Like, not only in high school, but from like elementary school up. Because I went to the same elementary school as you too, and like, just all the teachers and in middle school, like they're all so helpful, and they actually want the students to succeed, and they're just incredible at what they do. Just side note, the short story competition, they still do them.
Oh yeah,
I've entered into a few,
nice.
and I think the librarians are in charge of it. If you want to throw me a win, I'll take it once in a while.
Yeah, well, shout out to the librarians.
Yeah.
That's awesome, and I think a lot of that has to do with continuity. We have these teachers who are willing to invest decades of their careers into this school community, into the families that live here, to teach multiple generations of Concord families. That means a lot to me. It's one of the reasons I wanted to move back to Concord. And actually, I've been working with a couple of Concord teachers, one of whom was a teacher here when I was here, to file a bill next session on teacher retirement for teachers that, to get equitable retirement benefits and pension treatment for teachers who are teachers, have a child, leave the workforce for 2, 3, 4 years to raise kids, raise babies, and then come back. I think that is to everybody's benefit, where those excellent teachers decide to come back. But unfortunately, currently, they face some disparate treatment in terms of their retirement benefits. So, I'm always trying to think, as a legislator, I'm always trying to think about what are those things that happened when I was a kid, and what were those experiences that I have just as a student, as a parent, as a member of this community, that can inform better policy.
And speaking of when you were a kid, how would you say society's changed? And would you say it's done so positively and negatively?
I'm just going to be really honest with you, Gerald. I'm a little bit worried about Gen Z. I think that growing up into that age has changed a lot, not always in the best ways. I think COVID was part of that. I think, sadly, a lot of kids, teenagers missed some really kind of formative social developmental years, and I think we're seeing that. I take my legislative aide, Kyle, who you've interacted with a little bit to set up today. He's straight out of college, came to work with me. He was my campaign manager, a total ace. So hardworking, dependable, diligent. I feel like he's kind of the exception. And I see a disconnect in this, and I say this in a way that it may be things that I'm not seeing as a 38-year-old, and not necessarily totally understanding that generation as much as I should or could, or hopefully one day will. But I do think there's a little bit of a expectation when that generation comes into the workforce or into a job, that it's like all about them and their development, and like, what are you doing for me? Whereas it was different when I was 22, 23. It was not like that at all. It was just totally the opposite. It was, I'm going to throw myself into this and do everything I can to be a team player and contribute. And I probably to a fault, right? Like, that probably went too far. And then maybe we swung back a little bit too far the other way. So, we're all just kind of figuring it out.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if I'm Gen Z or Gen X.
I don't know either.
I think I might be in the cutoff. Yeah. Like, I'm in the last year,
okay.
I think, of Gen X. So I'm the good one. Yeah. I'm lucky.
Well, if you're Gen Z, like, you're doing good for Gen Z right now. You're rebranding Gen Z.
Rebranding. I think we're pretty good. Okay, so you say it's difficult. So how do you say you engage younger voters? Like, how do you stay in the loop and just like do stuff like that?
I've had such great experiences with high schoolers. So starting with my campaign, I heavily relied on high school students from all the towns in the district to canvas with me. So we spent the summer going around and like knocking on doors every day. I rode my bike door to door, and so they started riding their bikes. I will say I was faster than a few of them, but they caught up to me. They did not like that. Um, and they were awesome. And there were so many times, Gerald, so many times when I would knock on a door and days or weeks before one of the high school volunteers had already been to that household. And the voter would say, "Oh, I'm already voting for you because of what so and so said to me." They were awesome. My high school volunteers were awesome. I don't think there's anything better you could do from a professional development standpoint than have to go door to door.
Yeah.
Whether it's with politics, whether it's with selling coupons for the CCHS soccer team, or whatever it is. It is really hard. You have to learn how to talk to people, to look them in the eye, to level with them, to listen to them, to change your conversation on a dime if it's not going well. And these kids were awesome. And they really helped me understand what their generation was thinking about. And they also helped me reach out to other people who were like-minded. I think I came in with a perception, which ended up being wrong, that a lot of high school age students who care about politics in our area are like super far left, progressive. And that just was, at least, and maybe there was some self-selection happening, but like that was not what came to me. What came to me were people who were very interested in thinking in a balanced way about the issues that were in the news. And I was really, really impressed with the kids that I worked with. Honestly, the only bad thing about not having an opponent this cycle was that I didn't get to do that again with high school kids.
No, I've definitely noticed the same thing, because I feel like where we live, there's just like a perception that it's like completely far left. And I'm noticing maybe adults wise, it tends to be more so, but high school age, there's a lot of like more kids who don't really think that way and just would rather, or just trying to learn how everything works and care more about like policy than party, which I feel like from what I've heard is definitely a different view on politics than prior generations.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's good. It also probably speaks to some of the issues with our two-party system right now and the disconnect, as we said, branding issues, some of the branding issues of the two parties right now. I think people, in some cases, rightfully feel like the party structure is not built in a way that's very inclusive of their participation. So that's something that needs to change, or if it doesn't change, the parties will be at peril in the future.
For sure, I agree with you. Sidetracking again backwards here. Do you think there was ever a point where you envisioned going to politics? I know you said you weren't really thinking about careers in high school, but like when did you know this is what I want to do?
I was just talking to somebody today, someone from Concord who's interested in potentially running for office, that lives elsewhere now. And so this conversation's kind of top of mind for me. There are so many ways to go at this, but I'll tell you, for me, I woke up one day, I had not really been involved with politics at all, but I read in the news that our state rep at that time, Tammy Gouveia, she was going to run for lieutenant governor, which meant that she was vacating the seat. And a lot of things were going on in the world at that time. We had, just had January 6th. We were kind of straight off the heels of the Black Lives Matter movement. We were in the depths of COVID, and it was just an odd time. We had just had our second child, my wife and I, and I thought this is maybe a good re-entry point for me into public service, because I had spent my whole career first as a teacher in a public school and as a nonprofit leader, and then as a public corruption prosecutor in the public sector. And then I had left when I moved back here, to work at a law firm, and was kind of jonesing for a re-entry into public service as a as a centerpiece of my career. And that just ended up being a good opportunity. Now, when I got into it, I had no idea what I was getting into and really did not understand what the local political dynamics were or who else might be getting into the race. Very important thing to know. But it worked out.
I mean, you've been doing well too. I mean, you've done so much because you've done so much to the point where in my history class last year, U.S. history class, we took like a 3-week break for our civics project, and I had a teacher, Mr. Wilder, who spent like most of that time talking about you.
Oh,
And you
really?
must get a ton of letters because he has all of his classes right to you.
It's so funny because I have on my desk, I don't know, maybe it's Mr. Wilder's class. And if Mr. Wilder's watching, I hope he continues to do that. And also, I think I have like 35 letters on my desk, and these letters are so well written and personal that there's no way to just like write one paragraph back. So I'm like 2/3 of the way through them. And Kyle, my aide, is constantly reminding me, you got to keep going, you got to keep going. So they will get done. And it's funny when, sometimes I know the parents of the kids, so I'll like shoot them a text, and they, have no idea often that their kid wrote this letter. But those have been really impressive and interesting to read.
They have it down for science for those letters though, because they give us like a huge organizer and they say
Yeah.
make it as personal as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they give us like a week, so that's what, like an hour a class, 7 days. Oh,
Yeah.
5 days, excuse me. So 5 hours just to write the letter after planning. So like there's like, that's got to be tough
Well,
to
it's
get through.
interesting because, there are certain subject matter areas where I'll see a bunch of letters. Like I'll see a lot on gun violence, um, renewable energy, things like that. But then sometimes I will get just the most random, interesting, like a letter about food trucks, or like something like that, and that's really cool to see. Just kind of the different things that kids are thinking about.
I wrote mine on trains.
Okay.
I should have sent it to you because I sent it to Pete Buttigieg. Never got a response back.
Yeah. Well, he's busy, I'm sure.
Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
it still hurts
It's
a little
big
bit
country.
though.
Send it to me next time. You'll get something back.
For sure, I will. So, you've worked a ton, like you mentioned. You were a lawyer, you teacher, all those different things. What made you? Well, you said why you pivoted, but why did you like? They're not like really line up with each other necessarily. How did you like pivot from like being a teacher to a lawyer, etc.?
So I thought that I wanted to go to law school when I was in college because I interned and I'd encourage everybody during their time in college, if you go to college, to do internships that are rigorous and in person and office based. And I had the opportunity to intern for the Internet Crimes Against Children prosecutor at the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. She was an awesome boss, and the first or second week I was there, I got to follow her to court and watch her argue about sentencing for these defendants who have been convicted of crimes involving children on the internet. And I decided then that I wanted to be a prosecutor. I didn't want to be a lawyer, I wanted to be a prosecutor, and didn't totally know what that meant. But the more I learned, the more I wanted to do that. But I also knew that I didn't want to go straight to school or graduate school after college. I wanted to be on the ground doing something that felt real. So at that time, Teach for America was pretty aggressively recruiting on the campus where I went to college at Colorado College. They came in the early fall of my senior year, and they like found me and signed me up right away. And so that's what I was doing. At that time, they didn't have Teach for America in Boston yet. So the closest that I could get was New York City. And I went to go teach in Harlem. And that was great. And I loved that. I thought that I was signing up to teach chemistry at a high school. And this was a 6th through 12th grade school. So I get there and I do summer school teaching to teach juniors who had not yet passed the state exam in chemistry to pass that exam. So these are all kids who want to be there, right? They're there by choice. They may not have done it great in their course, but they all wanted to be there, and it went really well. And I thought I was doing really well. And so we get to the professional development day before the beginning of the school year. And the principal introduces me to the entire faculty in the cafeteria as the new special education 7th and 8th grade math teacher, Mr. Cataldo, which is not how you pronounce my name. So I ended up as a special ed teacher, and that was very, very difficult. Um, and I thought I was going to quit pretty much every day for a while. And by Thanksgiving, it was really bad. It was really bad in my classroom. It was not physically safe to be in my room. There were a lot of fights. I had this little like security phone in the room, and security would no longer just come to my room. They just stopped coming, and it was bad. And I just something very serendipitous happened. I went home, decided at the last second to go home for Thanksgiving, and at that, it was a very kind of last minute, and the only train ticket that was available was the business class or first class in the Acela, like the nicest train ticket that I never would have ever would have bought with my own money. But I was so desperate to go home that I just decided to pay for this ticket. And so I get there and I'm sitting down, and somebody comes and sits next to me, and he's this like very well coiffed gentleman, probably in his 40s, with like perfect hair. And we get to talking a little bit, and it turned out that he um, lived in Concord, and he commuted back and forth to his job at a major, very fancy bank in New York City. And at the end, he gave me his business card, and I was just, if you ever seen the movie American Psycho, it like looked like that business card. It was like perfect. And I'm just looking at this guy, and I'm just thinking, I could have been you. Like your life seems so perfect, and I'm just like this disheveled mess, unsuccessfully trying to teach kids in Harlem math. And so I went home and I thought, like, I'll just try for like another week, and if it doesn't work, I'm just quitting. Like, these kids deserve somebody who will be a good teacher. And in fact, the kids knew that too. Like, one of the kids, who was a 16-year-old 8th grader, had told me right before Thanksgiving break, like the class was all breaking down and everything was being terrible in class and no one was learning. And this one kid, I'll never forget his name was John, and he was 16 years old in 8th grade, and really funny, not academically doing that well. And he raised his hand in the middle of the class and he said, "They must really not believe in us if they made you our teacher." And I was like, oh, that is so true. Like, you really nailed it. So anyway, I'm sitting, I look at this guy's business card for like 4 days. I go back, and that's when I decided to try teaching them lacrosse. And it was like, boom. Took like a week, and everything totally changed. They became obsessed with lacrosse. Fast forward to the end of that school year, my kids had the highest grades in the state math exam in the school district that year, and for former low-level performers. And we were kind of off and running. And I loved that job, and I stayed there for 3 years. And kind of towards middle of my 3rd year, I thought, if I don't go to law school now, then I'm probably never going to go, and I'll just be doing this forever, which is great. And certainly worthy, as we talked about in the beginning of this show. Like, there's nothing better than a teacher who decides to stay there. But I just decided, for me, this is something I felt like I needed to do. So I took the LSAT and ended up going to University of Virginia School of Law, and that was awesome. And found a way to get into the federal justice department, and I was kind of off and running.
Few things I want to touch on with you. First, the Harlem lacrosse program that you started. I mean, I've learned a little bit about it. I'd like to hear more from you, but because it seems amazing.
Sure. Well, Concord has had a big role in this, and so perhaps some people who watch your show will have firsthand experience with it. As I said, it's just started as a lacrosse team of my students, in particular special education students. There were no organized team sports at the school at that time at all. So I wasn't competing really with much else in terms of after school activities for the kids. And very few of my students had ever played in any sort of organized sport. So didn't know how to start on a whistle, stop on a whistle, do any of that stuff. But a number of them were very athletic, but they didn't really know how to engage in organized team sports. So we really were starting from zero. There was a handball court beside the school, a concrete handball court, great for wall ball, and we just went out there with some donated ragtag equipment. There was a mother in Concord whose son was the head coach at a private high school in New Jersey, St. John's Metuchen. And this guy, Mark Moreau, gave us, and he still has family living in this area, it sent us like boxes and boxes of used equipment from his program. So I'll never forget that. And it showed up in Harlem, these boxes of equipment, and it was good enough to get us started. So we just took it from there, and the kids kind of got sick at lacrosse like pretty quickly. Nobody would play us for a year. So we would go up. There was one Catholic high school in the North Bronx, Southern Westchester, that was starting a JV team. So I brought my 7th and 8th grade kids to play these like junior football players, and neither of us like had really played lacrosse before. And in the very first face-off of our first game, and there is, by the way, one parent in the stands from our side, and that mother's son is on the wing. His name's Kevin, and he goes in to try to get the ball like a bat out of hell. He's like 80 pounds soaking wet, and he gets into the middle where the face-off is happening, and some like 16-year-old kid just like crams him, and he's like out like a light on there. And that's the very first like thing that we do. And then 6 years later, he was the senior captain on Haverford's lacrosse team. But that and his mom did not make him quit. God bless her. And he's having quite a bit of success professionally now. But that was our team. We were just like, ragtag group. And a year in, finally, there's something called the Ivy Prep League in New York City. And finally, one of those schools who happened to have a black athletic director agreed to play our team. And we went there to Randall's Island where we play those games. We took 2 subways and the M35 bus all across Harlem over the bridge with all our equipment. And they showed up, as all those schools did with, in their chartered bus. And we like got off the bus and we beat them 11-5. And then after that, all those teams would play us. We beat all of them. And we were just kind of like off and running. And pretty quickly, our kids started getting recruited to boarding schools, which was nothing that we ever intended. But for some of them, it was like it was an opportunity you couldn't turn down. And the beginning of when that happened was when we came here to Concord. A year and a half after I started the program, we brought about 30 kids here to this high school, to the upper field. The upper field was brand new. I know there's a lot of controversy in town right now about what's going to happen with the upper field. At that time, the upper field was brand new, and we had a flat tire on the way. So we were like an hour and a half late. It was sleeting, and the 7th and 8th grade kids were standing out there with the then CCYL president, Charles Gildehouse, and a bunch of other volunteers. And they were waiting there in the sleet and the snow for us. And it was like nothing had ever happened. They were so enthusiastic. Our kids like kind of like get off the bus and they start playing together, and it's great. There's a private school coach there who's refereeing. He starts recruiting a couple of the kids, and we were really expanding at that point. And then, the next big thing was I decided to go to law school and decided to turn it into a 501c3. And pretty soon after that, we started to have quite a bit of fundraising success, up to the point that now it's in 5 different cities. Thousands of kids have gone through the program. There are 60 full-time employees, so it's a real organization now.
Oh, it seems really cool. And the transition from special education into law for you seemed to right out of law school, like you just went straight into it. being on the honors, the DOJ. I mean, you prosecuted some some of the biggest names in the country for elected officials, just all over the country. I think I was reading about maybe one in Florida, and another in California. How did that feel, just jumping like straight into the mix?
I worked in a small section called the Public Integrity section, which now more recently has been in the news because Jack Smith, who's the special prosecutor in charge of the Trump investigations, he was the chief of that section right up until just before I got there, actually. And then he handed it over to another chief who was excellent and an incredible leader. And there was just a lot of mentorship there. There was a lot of support for young attorneys like me, and they relied on people who were willing to work really, really hard, who maybe didn't have kids or families of their own yet, and who were willing to travel all over the country. And at that point, I was just married but didn't have kids yet, and that was me. And I was willing to work really hard and learn from some of the best federal prosecutors in the country. So it was just an incredible experience. And, in turn, what I got back from that was the opportunity to work on some really, really high profile cases and stand up in court and do trials and do all that stuff. And there were many times when judges or defense attorneys made remarks about, oh, he's too young to be here, et cetera, et cetera. And I just fed off that. That was perfectly okay with me. There's nothing better than being underestimated, and it was great. It was great. I loved that job. The thing about that job for me personally was that my wife and I started to have kids, and traveling that much just wasn't a great fit. And I was also really feeling the pull of coming back to the Boston area.